You're watching TVC Breakfast. Parents with children with cerebral palsy go through a lot of challenges raising them.
That's because Nigeria lacks homes dedicated to their special care. Health correspondent Jacqueline Ogo presents her findings from her visit to the Cerebral Palsy Center in Lagos.
Talking about a health condition is different from finding out for real all that needs to be known. Fired up by this inquisitiveness, I decided to visit this Cerebral Palsy Center in Surulere, Lagos. Noyen set up this place due to a life experience. Her marriage broke after 7 years because she couldn't have a child, but she still wanted a child so badly, so she decided to adopt one. At 5 months, when her baby couldn't make some proper movements, she discovered thereafter it was cerebral palsy.
At 7 months, I took her to a daycare, and I was told that they can't take her because other parents will start withdrawing their children. Then at 1 year, I found a center where I was taking her. They manage children with all disabilities. But after 18 months, I took her out because in the center they had children with all disabilities. And of course, we found out that there was no specialization.
Children with cerebral palsy are kids with special needs who need special care and regular therapies. Some are fed through gastro tubes, which cost as much as $200 because they can't swallow food. The tubes can only be used for 3 months before they are disposed of. Here at the Cerebral Palsy Center, there are 20 children. 10 live in and 10 are taken back home by their parents at the close of the day. But Noyen Weke says there is still a huge need for space. The children can't walk, so they have to be carried up the staircase to their rooms, which would be better if more spacious. They have special bath chairs. A more spacious bathroom will make their care easier. Jacqueline Ogo, TVC News, Lagos.
Oh, we have in the studio former administrator, Down Syndrome Foundation, Muyiwa Majekodumi. He is here with his son, Olumakinwa Majekodumi. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good to see you. Wow.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Now, let's talk about cerebral palsy. When did you discover that your son had cerebral palsy?
Correction, my son doesn't have cerebral palsy.
Okay.
He has Down syndrome.
Down syndrome, all right.
Yes. And there's a major difference. Yes. Cerebral palsy is actually from the brain. And palsy, cerebral meaning, the palsy meaning weak. Okay. My son has Down syndrome, and it was discovered at birth. But it actually starts in the womb, at conception, when there's a fusion between the eggs. So what happens on the body is made up of 46 cells. Now on the 21st cell, there's a division of cells, and that causes that problem. It's called trisomy 21. So and that's when it was discovered when he was born that he had this condition.
But for cerebral palsy, where does that, what causes that?
Cerebral palsy, 2 or 3 things to cause cerebral palsy. It could be caused by lack of oxygen to the brain. It could be caused by maternal infections, and it could be caused by a brain infection. Yes.
While during conception or
during,
at birth?
No, usually at birth. I think sometimes what happens is when the child is being delivered, the lack of oxygen gets to the brain, and that causes that problem. And yeah, it's a trauma. It's actually caused by a trauma, and it could also be caused by the mother having an infection. It could also be caused by a brain infection.
Wow.
Okay, looking at cerebral palsy in this regard now, how do parents actually cope raising kids with that kind of nature?
I can only talk from my personal perspective with Down syndrome,
Yeah.
and also from AVM Femi Gbadibo, who has a son who has cerebral palsy. AVM Femi Gbadibo's son has a severe case of cerebral palsy. He's immobile. It actually varies from the mild to the severe. AVM's son's case is severe, and he has to be taken care of. You know, he has to have a 24-hour nursing care. He has to be fed. He has to be taken care of. You know, it's for parents who have children with cerebral palsy. I'll be honest with you, I do not know how they cope, but it's actually a very tough condition to deal with. Compared to Down syndrome, I think I'm on holiday.
Really?
Yeah, compared to Down syndrome, I'm on holiday.
How?
I'm on vacation.
How?
Because my son, to a certain extent, is independent.
Okay.
You know, he is active. He is quite creative, quite witty. He has very little medical conditions. You know, I mean, very. He doesn't have any serious case of any medical condition, apart from maybe bronchial issues. But that's been taken care of. But compared to people who have severe cases of cerebral palsy, I will not tell you a lie. I am on holiday, and I think if anybody is to win the Father of the Year award, it would be Femi Gbadibo. Yes.
All right, but the challenge here is, although there is no cure.
Yes, there's no cure.
Absolutely, but taking care in terms of access to some things that the child will need.
Yes.
There has been some challenges.
Yes.
How do you cope with, even though he is having a Down syndrome?
Yes.
That also has to do with there are similarities when it comes to access to care. So to speak.
Yes, access to medical care. Thank you very much. Hospitals in Nigeria, I believe, do not have any strong background information as to how to deal with people with disabilities. It's an all-round thing. Whether it's a cerebral palsy, whether it's Down syndrome, there is a lack of knowledge about of care, which is why people like Noye, who set up the Cerebral Palsy Center in Surulere, came up with her own foundation, and she's doing quite well. She's planning to build a proper cerebral center where she can also take care of these people, and as well, have a source of education to parents who have children who have these wonderful children.
Absolutely wonderful. Absolutely.
Let's look at government intervention. Is government doing enough?
Good question. Who's government? It's you and I. It's you and I. I think what government really has to do is to create that enabling environment. There's a law, disability law out right now, but it's a law. It's on paper. It's actually the implementation.
That's always a challenge.
The free healthcare, free transportation, building access. Access to buildings. There are specific laws which have been created by the government to take care of
persons living with disabilities.
Yes, but it's going to take a while before it is actually implemented. But in the meantime, it's a question of what can you and I do? I mean, there's so much darkness in the world. Simply light a candle, and that's what Noye is doing. That's what AVM Gbadibo is doing with CP, and that's what I'm trying to do with Down syndrome.
All right. But then another aspect is in terms of families, seeing that there is no cure, so to speak, are you concerned? Or is there any concern that comes to you as a parent concerning the fact that there is no cure to issues like this?
There's the concerns, I guess, for most parents is the future. What's going to happen when I go? What's going to happen to him when he goes? Unlike the West, Europe, America, England, there are homes
where they can stay.
Where they can stay. But then, you see, we have our own support in terms of family. You know, families. You know, he has brothers. He has brothers and siblings who can take care of him, and I guess that for other people, they too have their brothers and siblings which can take care of them. I do know that the Down Syndrome Foundation, of which I am a member, is planning to set up like a halfway home for people living with Down syndrome, whereby they can be taken care of.
Absolutely.
This guy is dangerous.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, right.
So I do know that the foundation, the Down Syndrome Foundation, and I'm aware that that is also Noye's plan to set up our own home.
Yes.
Somewhere in Lekki.
Yeah.
In fact, she had a groundbreaking ceremony about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So there are plans in the process. We're taking one day at a time.
Absolutely. Okay. When we talk about cerebral palsy, although people have sometimes mixed it up with cases of Down syndrome as well. But looking at that report, we saw she still looking at the fact that there's a whole lot that has to be done.
Yes.
When you are to evaluate how far as a nation we have come to addressing issues of people living with disabilities, because this is where you classify them,
That's right.
how would you say we have fared so far?
On a scale of 1 to 100, I would just say 1.
1?
1.
Yes,
low.
or 2. Yes, it's very
Really poor.
Very low. In terms of there's a lot of superstition. Let's look at the climate, the cultural climate we're in. A lot of people think people living with disabilities, who have disabilities, whether it's Down syndrome, you know, my son has Down syndrome, or cerebral palsy, it's caused by some mother-in-law in the village or some witch or something. So there's a lot of superstition. And then also from the societal aspect in terms of Medicare and facilities, we still haven't gotten there. Even though the Lagos State government has enacted the Lagos State Disability Law, it's just really the letter.
And the federal, there is a law that has to do with
like I said, well, there is a federal, but
disability.
it's like I said, it's just a letter. It hasn't really been. There's no enabling act. It's there in the constitution. It's there, right? But in terms of implementation, we still have a very long way to go.
Now, in terms of issues of superstition, let's bring it home.
But,
Let's begin with charity begins at home. How are people being educated when it comes to issues such as this? How much engagement so far? Because I know your foundation at the time had done so much.
And it still is.
And it still is. And we have the Noye who also is doing a whole lot.
Yes,
so how far is that helping with educating people?
Well, there are individual efforts, not necessarily concerted efforts. I mean, there's AVM, Femi Gbadebo of Benola, who's doing a lot too in terms of cerebral palsy. There's a lot of education going on. There's a lot of groundbreaking going on. There are seminars, there are talks here and there. There are write-ups in the newspapers. There are visits to schools and other institutions.
But that doesn't seem to be getting the desired result.
Well, it starts with one person. You know, you can't do everybody, but all it takes is you start with one person, and then the knowledge spreads. Put it this way: as far as the foundation is concerned, Down Syndrome Foundation is concerned, we are not where we should be, and I suppose that applies to Noye, but she's not where she was before. In terms, I mean, the fact that the message is going on is that look, I saw quite a number of children in her establishment. Probably started with 1 or 2 or 3. The fact that more people are coming up shows that the message is getting across. Some people may come to us, you know, occasionally and say, look, I have a child with this and that, but we don't know what's wrong with the child. And we examine the child and we say, oh, this is CP. You need to go see Noye. You need to go see Femi Gbadebo. But the message is getting out, getting out there.
But we see that there's a lack of infrastructure, especially schools, for these young ones. And if you see the actual schools that help train these ones, it's very expensive.
Yes.
And a lot of Nigerians who have kids like that might not have the wherewithal to consistently train them in that regard. So how can government come in to solve this problem? Because
even at some point the government was looking at having inclusive education.
Yes. we've had a situation whereby even when you take a child with a condition to
a regular school,
don't be surprised to find out if the parents of the kids there reject. I know of I know of an instance or instances of people who have taken their children with disabilities to these schools, and the parents have kicked against it, and have told the principal that if you do not remove this child, we will withdraw our children.
That's also boils down to education and stigmatization.
Yeah, stigmatization. So what do you do? There has to be a law. You can't. There's a law against discrimination. There's a law against discrimination, but it's the actual implementation of it.
How would you want the government to go about implementation in this? Because there are levels. That is why we have state governments, we have local governments. The federal government must have made that.
Make an example.
All right.
Encourage people to come in to report that my child is facing discrimination either in the hospital. Even sometimes hospitals reject these children. My child is facing discrimination in the hospital. My child is facing discrimination in a school. My child is facing discrimination in. There must be an avenue whereby these things can be redressed. If there's no opportunity for redress, this problem will continue.
So now looking forward,
yes.
How does NGOs like yours, people
yes.
like you, engage government to ensure that there is a bridge between the government and people?
And the people.
Yes, and ensure that implementation is done. Moving forward, we're looking at the bigger
yes.
picture now. And then the capacity, the structures needed to ensure that these persons living with this kind of disabilities get what they need.
I think one of the things we will continue to do is to continue to engage. Continue to engage the government. The only issue I have found out is sometimes there's this lack of continuity. In Ambody's government, administration, he set up this endowment fee for people with disabilities. It's the continuity. I'm not too sure of what this administration policy is as regards
persons with disabilities.
So it's a continuity. You hand over a baton to somebody else has another priority. I don't know. We're not too sure what this administration's policy plans are. Yes.
All right. Now, from that report, you can see that it takes a whole lot to care for people living with whether cerebral palsy, as long as it is persons living with disabilities. And the question that comes to mind is, what would it take to have an inclusive society to really ensure care of persons living with this kind of disabilities?
Ooh. Good question. Inclusion. That's an adjective, right? Let me talk from the perspective of my son who has the Down syndrome.
Yeah.
I said to somebody earlier that compared to people who are dealing with people who have cerebral palsy, compared to Down syndrome, I'm on holiday. I'm on vacation because care of my son it's challenging too, but compared to CP, it is an uphill, a whole lot. And you watch that video, you can see what I know Noye personally, and I've seen how grow over the years, and she's actually been under tremendous pressure. It's only right now, if you meet her one-on-one, that she's beginning to things are beginning to ease up for her. Now, inclusion means love. Bottom line is simply love. It's as simple as that. Love, acceptance. Society doesn't recognize them or stigmatizes them because of their condition. But if you look at their souls, their spirits, what they offer, the kind of they love they exude themselves, you would accept them. I use the word I am fortunate. I'm fortunate to have a son with the condition Down syndrome. I'm very fortunate because it's made me who I am.
Oh.
Yeah, it's made me who I am. It's made me more patient, more loving, more caring. And at the same time, I am people like Noe and I are beginning to show the world this is how these people should be treated. And the fact that there are hundreds, there are thousands of people with this condition, it shows that you and I have a purpose, and that purpose is to show the world that we need to include these people in our lives.
Okay, so this message of inclusion, now we see that from the beginning of their lives to when they eventually leave the world, we see that it's not properly taken care of, where they can't really go to regular schools.
Yes.
They can't get regular jobs.
That's right.
And facilities to cater for
Yes.
them. How do we push this message of inclusion such that they are very intelligent?
They are very
Absolutely.
intelligent.
Yeah.
Really intelligent. But I realize that when they're done with, for instance, the university, if at all a lot of them go to university,
Yes.
they don't actually get jobs, and so they're dependent on family members and people around them.
Yes. Put it this way. CP is not necessarily an intellectual disability. You know.
But it affects the brain.
Yes, but not everybody who has CP is affected. I mean, there's a lady in Ghana who runs a popular IT company. She has cerebral palsy. Yeah. There are hundreds in Nigeria who have cerebral palsy and are doing well. Yeah. It's just that they've been fortunate and they've been determined to climb out of that box that society tries to put them in. We talk about the enabling environment, you know, that the government has to create. The government itself, I think right now, even Lagos State government, well, I don't know about now, but during ambulance administration, he was employing people who have disabilities.
Yes, it is required about 5%.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think the law even states it. But the thing is that we need to be very practical. We need to match your abilities with what the organizations require. And that's one thing we're doing right now at the foundation, Down Syndrome Foundation. We're teaching, facilitating a program for advocacy skills of these children. And one of the things that someone said, I want to be a banker, I want to be a nurse. But you see, you need to match the realities with what you're capable of doing.
So are you saying invariably that some sort of, there should be a creation of a different, maybe organization or something for people living with this kind of disabilities?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
No, I'm saying that they should be included in whatever the scheme of things,
okay.
But they should match their capabilities,
the requirements of the
organization. You know, otherwise, it will just be a charity thing. We're not asking you to pity them.
You have been doing this for years now.
31 years, my son is 31 years.
All right, your son is 31 years,
Yes.
and you have a foundation which also, you have been part of a foundation.
That's right, yes.
Yes, which deals with people with living with Down syndrome,
yes.
and all of that. How challenging has it been for you ensuring that this message of love is spread across to not just through your son, but people you have met?
While I was at the foundation, I was taking care of about almost 60, 70 children. In fact, I just discovered, just recently, two months ago, that I really didn't have too much time for my son because I was focused on other children. It's about really what can you do for other people. And you have to live by example. And that's what I've been trying to tell people, that if I can show love to people and care, I'm not just talking about superficial love, but genuine care, genuine concern, then you can do it. Sorry, a little direction. Noya talked about her losing her husband because of this. Do you realize marriages have collapsed because children with these disabilities were born? Wow. Yeah, parents have separated because the wife accused, the husband accused the wife of being the cause of the child with CP or the child with the Down syndrome or whatever it is, because there was no love or understanding. But my duty, and this is what I'm trying to showcase right now, is that if I can love my son despite his own challenges, despite his, then you can too.
Absolutely. A very important message. Thank you so much, Miwa Majakudumi, for your time on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you so much.